The breaking news is the appeals court has thrown out the massive, nearly $500 million penalty against President Trump. And this was over, Will, what they were calling the overvaluation of properties,
right,
and all those things. You heard us talking about this over and over and over again. But now there at least is some justice. Now, it doesn't mean it's over yet, but at least this step is concluded, and the ACLJ, as I said, front and center.
That's right. So this is the case that was before Judge Engoron, which, remember, the famous photo op that people made an Office meme out of because it was ridiculous. He allowed cameras in his courtroom to come take photos. And then he handed down, there was no jury, this was a bench trial, where he handed down a $400 million judgment, but with penalties and interest, puts it over $500 million penalty against President Trump. It also banned him and his family from running the business of the Trump organization. And this was Letitia James' civil fraud case. This was the case where she said that Mar-a-Lago and other assets were overvalued and able to get loans, and then that enriched the Trump organization. The Supreme Court, which is what the lowest court in New York is, handed down this huge penalty, unprecedented penalty against President Trump. Well, today, in an appeal at the New York Supreme Court Appellate Division, First Judicial Department, a 5-judge panel handed down an opinion which completely wipes out that $500 million penalty. They said it violated the 8th Amendment of the United States Constitution. And right there, you see the opinion on the front page, who is listed as a party to it, because we filed in this case, making an argument that it's the American Center for Law and Justice. So as we celebrate this 35 years of justice, remember, some of these things you may have even forgotten were still going on. These appeals of the lawfare perpetrated against President Trump when he was running for office.
Yeah, they've just been in the background.
We're still fighting, and we're still getting victories even today.
Well, I think, first of all, it's very significant because it eliminated what was clearly an excessive fine. It violated the 8th Amendment. What you would and Will have been talking about in the first segment is correct. The ACLJ played a pivotal role here. We wrote a brief that argued that allowing that judgment to stand, that Letitia James brought this suit, that allowing it to stand would in fact violate the Constitution, would also inhibit free speech and political discourse. And what is, I think, very significant here is Judge Friedman, in his opinion, writes that it quotes, not just references our brief, but quotes our brief. We said the statute provides a license for the Attorney General to pursue anyone based on an alleged inaccuracy and regardless of whether anyone has been harmed, just as she did here. And then it said, by removing the inherent protections of traditional fraud law, Section 63 enables political opponents to be prosecuted under a regime of strict liability regardless of any actual culpability or mental state. The mental state is intent to commit a civil fraud. So Judge Friedman cites our brief in the case, and I want to underscore the importance of this. When we talk about an amicus brief, some people say, well, what is that exactly? It's amicus stands for friend of the court. We had standing to file a brief in the case as a friend of the court, and our briefs as amicus briefs have been cited not only by appellate courts and federal appellate courts and state appellate courts, but we've been cited by the U.S. Supreme Court as an amicus. So this is a huge win. But the deterrent effect of political activity and investment in New York City, a lot of businesses left New York because of their concerns about what happened to President Trump. And these are not necessarily people that had any political axe to grind. It was just they were concerned about doing business in a state where they could do something like this. Now, there's going to be an appeal here to the next level. This was the appellate division, which is the intermediate appellate court. It will now go to the Court of Appeals. And I will assure everyone that's listening right now that the American Center for Law and Justice is going to be front and center. We spent a lot of time on this brief and to work it out. And the reality is this is a big win, but we need the next step here, which is 2 of the justices would have voted to dismiss the entire matter. And I think at the appeals court, at the next level, we're going to win that aspect too. But those fines are gone.
Well, and that's one thing I wanted to ask you about as well, knowing that the office of Letitia James will still try to make sure that this judgment against him, regardless of the fines being wiped out, stands. This was one of her key achievements as Attorney General of the state of New York. But as we look at that next level, knowing already that there are some of these justices in the appellate division that think that the entire charge should have been dismissed, and knowing that our rationale was used by one of those justices on this appellate division, does that give one more, gumption behind our fight as we take this forward, that it could be total vindication by even having this completely wiped from the books?
I think there's we have a real chance at that. I mean, I'm optimistic. I mean, first of all, getting those civil penalties, which were draconian to say the least, out of the way is a huge win. The next phase will be this injunction that they put in place, which puts some restrictions on how the Trump organization does business. You know, we've been involved in these cases from the outset, but I want to underscore something here, Logan, that you said right before the break, and that is, you look at the work of the American Center for Law and Justice, we're talking about 35 years of victory. Here's one where we're defending the Constitution of the United States and the President of the United States, and we are successful. And the reality is, what's at stake is the ability of American citizens to do business, to engage in free speech without this kind of retaliation. And the fact that our brief got cited is huge.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that, I guess you're expecting it in the sense of you put a lot of hard work in it, but when you see it sort of up front and center, when you see not only ACLJ listed, but direct quotes and cites happening, you know that we are putting together a team that can really impact the world. And I think that's always something, Dad, we want to pitch, and always something I talk about here, which is I want to bring in the best of the best. We want to make sure we have the best lawyers. We want to make sure we have the best media broadcasting team, because we can't do it without them. And if you don't have this level of success. And I think that's what proves. When you have 35 years of victory, it's not just a catchphrase. It is something that is true and honest. Sure, are there wins and losses along the way? Of course there are. But the mass majority of what we have done has been securing victories for everyone from what you consider, I guess, to be a child in an elementary school all the way up to the President of the United States.
That's exactly correct. And all of those cases are equally important to our teams. And I want to thank our ACLJ members, especially our ACLJ champions, but also our ACLJ members for supporting us, to allowing us to do this kind of work. I remember working on this brief. It's been a while. I mean, this case took a long time to get decided. And the reality is, we had the same team on this brief that was on our Supreme Court team. So it was those same lawyers, even though this was at an intermediate appellate court. But the idea that we have not only obtained a victory, but then get a citation in the opinion itself that talks about the negative impact, the deterrent effect on political activity and investment by this case, and then cites our brief. I mean, Logan, this is huge. I mean, what I'm hoping that everyone that's listening to broadcast or watching understands is that the reality is our brief gets cited. So then ask yourself this question: what if that brief wasn't filed? So that's what you got to realize. I mean, you know, the courts can do so much, but that's why these briefs are so important. There are organizations that just do amicus briefs. Now, we do a lot more than that, but I mean, because it's that important.
I think that's good to show people, because I think you'll hear that, and a lot of times people do think of it maybe as a throwaway item, as they think of, an amicus brief, they're not really directly involved, they're just kind of getting involved in a way that they can see fit and they can fundraise on and all that. But here's the proof maybe to the biggest extent that is not the case.
100%. You're cited by a court on a case that has huge ramifications for the Constitution, the Eighth Amendment, the First Amendment, and the ability of people to do business. And then, of course, the presidency itself. So what you have here is, I think this is like the perfect example of why it's important for us to continue to do this. And I want to ask everybody that's listening today, if you are able to support the work of the American Center for Law and Justice, do it. We've got a great team. We've recruited great young lawyers. We're developing a whole program to go forward. You're doing that on the media side as well. And again, I think this shows the synergy of everything of the ACLJ in impacting from the President of the United States, Logan, as you said, all the way down to a school board hearing.
That's right.
We're
Thank you.
there.